I think we must have been 11 or 12, and our friend was having a sleepover for her birthday. She was a part of our group, and we were excited as we had never been to this particular friend's house before. Her parents put an amazing amount of effort into the party. There was a buffet, barbecue, cake, and even a clown. We were kinda embarrassed by the clown. We thought we were too old, and it was just awkward. But that was nothing compared to the dad's party games. First one, find the 50 pennies. He had 50 pennies around the house, and we had to find them. Only he was chasing us and hooting and really screaming, like a hyperactive child. Again, we were embarrassed, but the birthday girl seemed to be having a good time, so we pretended to be in the spirit of things. Then there was the wish game. He wanted us to sit on his knee and tell him a wish. Now, I'm really uncomfortable, and I can tell my friend is as well, but the birthday girl's on her dad's knee, telling him her wishes. Before we knew it, he's looking at my friend, patting his lap. At the time, I thought my friend put in commendable effort not to look horrified. But looking back, there is no way in hell he could have thought she was comfortable sitting on his knee. She sits on his knee and mumbles her wish, and then it's my turn. Fool is me, because I thought I would get a pass for being a boy, but no such luck. He's patting his knee, looking at me. So I sat on his lap and told him a wish. Nothing overtly sinister happened, but it creeped us out. After that came the cellar game. That's what he called it, and I'm thinking, hell no, I'm not going into a cellar with this creepy old man. And I can tell my friend is almost panicking at the thought. But then the dad takes up a rug, and there's a trapdoor under it, leading to the cellar, and then I'm thinking, well, if that's not the coolest thing. So we go down into the cellar. Truth be told, it was pretty cool at first. The dad had a candle, and that was the only light with the door closed. It was a small concrete room, and we sat on the floor while the dad told us creepy stories. I got the feeling those weren't age-appropriate stories, and our parents wouldn't be very happy if they had been there. But that made it all the more cooler. He's telling a story and getting to the creepy reveal bit. Then he blows out the candle. We are plunged into the absolute darkness. I'm laughing and shouting, as is the birthday girl, and my friends are really laughing. She actually sounds panicked. We get out of the cellar, and I'm saying how cool that was, but my friend looks really upset. Before bed, I managed to catch her alone and ask her whether she's alright. She tells me that after the dad blew out the candle, he tickled her in the dark and kind of put his head into her neck. She's really frightened and makes me promise I'll stay awake with her in case the dad does something. My friend falls asleep, and so is the birthday girl. And I'm really tired, but my friend made me promise, and the truth is, I felt like a knight in shining armor. I must stay awake to protect my friends, and lo and behold, I can hear someone coming up the stairs. Slowly, like they're not trying to make a noise. And then the door opens, and the dad sticks his head around the door. He stays like that for what seems like ages. At least 2 or 3 minutes, just watching. He mustn't notice me because I'm not making an effort to pretend to be asleep. I'm just watching him watching her, my friend. He then walks into the room and over to my friend. He just stands over her watching her. I'm completely freaked out, and despite feeling like a knight in shining armor 10 minutes ago, I now have no idea what to do, and I can feel pin prickles behind my eyes. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I let it go and made a noise. At this, the dad looks my way. I remember his eyes going really wide, and then he sort of scurried really fast out of the room. My heart was hammering away, and I'm looking at my friend, wanting to wake her up. I didn't though, and at some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up the next morning. This happened to me when I was a young boy. I am now in my late 50s, and I haven't thought about being 10 years old in a long time. I remember it being around my 10th birthday when everything changed in my life for my family. I remember it being the best birthday yet because my mom had secretly saved up enough money to buy me my own bicycle, and I was more than thrilled. No more borrowing my older brother's when he let me, or standing on the back or sitting on the handlebars of a friend's bike. We were by no means well off when I was young. We didn't have much, so getting that bike had meant a lot to me. My father was a man who worked a lot and drank even more than he worked. I am pretty sure he was drunk more than he was ever sober, and because of that, he was hardly around. That was okay with me, my siblings, and my mother for the most part. Things were actually nice and peaceful when he wasn't home, and the nights he did come home, We knew right away to steer clear of them, be quiet, and leave them alone. We lived outside of a small town down a long dirt road with not very many neighbors nearby. The closest one was a good mile down from us, a really big farmhouse with a lot of fields around them. I remember being friends with their kids as they were around the same age as us and we went to school together. Their mom was very sweet and always offered us something to eat or drink when we would stop down there. And their dad. Well, he was the complete opposite of our father. I never seen him drunk, or yell, or slap them or their mom around. We knew that not every family was like ours, and that some fathers out there actually seemed to care for them. Like I said, I remember it being around my 10th birthday, because my mom had baked a big cake for myself, my brother, and my 2 younger sisters, to share, and of course, she had some too. Then she took me out back where she had hidden the bike from me in one of the sheds, and I remember screaming with excitement, hugging and kissing her, telling her I loved her and that she was the greatest mom ever. I hopped on it right away and took off up and down the road to test it out. It was a great feeling in that moment. When something so great happens, you kind of forget the regular hell life you seem to live every other day. It's hard to explain, I guess. Things were good the next couple of days. My father had not really been home for almost a week probably at that point. Sometimes he would just stop in for a few moments here or there. I guess to check up to make sure my mom hadn't left him or anything. When I was at that age, I hardly recall at any point in time when he was home for more than 1 or 2 nights in a week. Never 2 nights in a row. We, the kids, never knew what he was doing, nor did we ever really want to know. We just knew it was better at home when he wasn't there. I remember riding my bike down the dirt road, on my way home from running into town to pick up something at the grocery store for my mom, when my dad's pickup truck passed me and kept heading on down toward home. It made me want to not even go back home, but really, what else could I do? The sun was starting to go down, and normally if he did come home, it was right after work or very late at night, after he left who knows where. So it was kind of odd he was on his way home at this time of the day. By the time I pulled up into the yard, I could already hear the yelling. I could hear my mom's voice trying to reason with him for something, and then I would hear my dad's voice just overpower hers. I heard something smash. I didn't want to go inside. I could hear my little sisters bawling, and then I heard my mom crying too. My older brother just happened to be down at the neighbor's place that had the farmhouse. I really didn't want to go inside at this point. Then I heard another smash. I decided to go in because I couldn't leave my mom and sisters in there alone with him. I peeked in the window of the door before I actually walked in and saw the house getting destroyed right in front of my family by my crazy drunk father. I tried opening the door slightly and getting my sister's attention to come out, but my dad seen and went focusing on them to me. I blocked a lot of this out, but from what I can remember, he turned and went straight for me and picked me up by the shoulders and started screaming in my face. My mom was behind him, begging him to put me down, but he just turned and gave her another slap in the face, and she backed down. From what I could tell that was coming out of him, he was livid when he saw me riding down the road on a bike he knew wasn't my brother's. When he got home, he confronted my mom on where it came from. He got out of her that she had secretly been stashing away money to save up to get me the bike, and my dad lost it when she told him that. I'm sure he was probably on a 5 or 6 day heavy drinking binge at this point, because I remember the smell of his breath was like sour whiskey pouring into my nostrils as he screamed at me. He was sure that my mother was hiding other things from him, and he was going to find out what. That is why he started tearing up the house. In the 5 minutes it took him from passing me on the road until I got there, he had done quite a bit. All the furniture was thrown around, lamps and pictures had been smashed, and he threw me against one of the walls. And as I looked up from the floor, he had stormed into the kitchen and smashed what was left of my birthday cake against the back door. Both my sisters were huddled into the corner, holding each other, while my mom cried and had blood running down her face. That was it for me. This was the worst I had ever seen my father, and I was scared. I ran out of the house, hopped on my bike, and started heading towards the neighbors. We didn't have a telephone at that time, but I knew they did, and I was going to call the police in town and stop him. I hardly got out of the driveway when I heard their front door open and heard my father yelling me to get my ass back there. I just kept on pedaling, thinking I needed to get to the neighbors and everything would be better. That's when I heard his truck start up, and I looked behind me as he was backing out of the driveway, and he started heading towards me. I could see the neighbor's house in the distance, and I just kept on pedaling until I started to see the headlights getting closer and closer. I looked behind me and he was so close that I knew he was going to hit me. I remember just jumping off the bike towards the side of the road and tumbling into the side of the field. I shot up and just started running across the field towards the neighbors, hearing my dad yelling but not really caring. When I looked behind me, I seen that my father had already turned around and was heading back towards their house. I got to the neighbors a few minutes later and pounded on the door. Their mom opened the door and took a step back because at this point I was sobbing and shaking and probably didn't look like my normal self. She took me inside and called to her husband to get in there. I was in the middle of telling them what happened, but my brother and his friend walked in from playing out back, and in about 2 seconds, he was out the door heading towards home. The mom called the police in town, and they said they would send someone out right away. About 10 minutes had passed and no police had shown up, so I begged the husband to please drive me down to my house. I didn't know what was happening and I was scared. He agreed since he knew my little sisters and my mom were there. About halfway down the road, we passed my bike. It was completely mangled up. My dad had ran it over with his truck. I started crying again, partly because I loved that bike, but mostly because I could have still been on it when he did that. We get to the house and my father's truck is gone. Apparently my brother ran all the way home, picked up a baseball bat that was on the side of the house, and with no hesitation, walked into the living room and smashed my dad's kneecap in. As he laid there screaming, my brother grabbed my sisters and my mother and ran into one of the bedrooms. He managed to crawl out to his truck and drive away though. The cops showed up just a few minutes after the neighbor and I arrived and took a look at everything that happened. They found my dad about an hour later, one town over at the local tavern. I said it wasn't very hard to find him since he was a well-known drunk in the area and the bars were the first places they were going to look for him. They arrested him pretty much on the spot. That night, after the police found my dad, the neighbors invited us to stay with them for however long we needed to. My mom was embarrassed but so very thankful for their help. We had only stayed a couple of days, enough time for my mom to make arrangements to leave that town and go live with my aunt for a while and a couple 100 miles away from where we lived. I never did see my father again after that, and I've never really minded that. I know he wasn't in jail too long, because shortly after we got settled into my aunt's is when the phone calls and letters started. But my mom never caved and went back. Who would? After a year or so, he gave up and agreed to a divorce. I never really paid much attention to that, as I was still young and was living a different life than I had before. We stayed with my aunt for a couple of years until my mom saved up enough money after getting a job to get her own place. At that point, my brother was 16 or 17, so he was also helping bring in money from his job as well as myself with the newspaper route. I even saved up enough money to get myself another bike. Life was better than it had ever been. For the longest time, there was this man that would sit in his garage and watch me. He was an older man and he was very scrawny, and had patchy gray hair and a super gross beard. I never learned his name, so we'll call him Nick. He looked like a Nick to me. I moved into my classic suburban home before I was ever born. I'd been living here my whole life, and my first memory I have of Nick was when I was 10, and he gave me a small 2-finger wave as I walked back home from school. I had to see him every day since my bus stop was a few houses down, and I walked like a block to get home. My mom said he dropped by after I was born, knocked on the door in the middle of the day, and rang the doorbell until someone answered. My mom finally answered. My 1-year-old brother attached to her leg and newborn me in her arms. She said his face was lit up when he saw me. He smiled brightly and asked to hold me. She obviously denied, because who the hell comes to your house to hold your child when you don't know them in the slightest? She said he scowled at her before calmly walking back to sit in his garage to smoke a cigar. After my first encounter with Nick, I never stopped seeing him. Every day after school, every morning before school, every time I took my dogs out for a walk, every time I peeked out of my window at 3 a.m. I swear this guy never slept. I told my brother how it freaked me out, and he said he was probably on house arrest, and that was the only way he could get out. We learned that this wasn't true when he knocked on our door. A small background for this bit. My mom is very weak. She has an autoimmune disease, and her legs and feet will go numb randomly. She's doing a lot better now, but this event happened when she was pretty bad. She insisted that she take the dogs out alone, and I didn't want to argue, so I sat in the living room. After about a minute, I hear a knock. I yell out that the door is unlocked, thinking it's my mom, but there's a louder knock. I get up and go to the door. I open it, and there he is, smiling at me. "Hey, hon, your mom fell off the porch. You might want to help her," Nick states, giving me goosebumps. His voice was unreal, so raspy and sounded like he was in the process of choking. He leaves very quickly, and I hurry to help my mom off the grass, calling my younger brother to get the 2 dogs inside. I gave her the "I told you so" speech, and she grumbled about it for weeks. My younger dog, a pit bull made of like 98% muscle, got excited when she saw a bird. She pulled to get the bird and yanked my mom off the porch. She was standing behind a pot and tripped over on her way down, making the fall hurt a lot more. She had a black eye and her legs were scratched up to hell and back. The pot of flowers that she tripped over was smashed, but she was okay otherwise. Fast forward to my 13th birthday, and my mom's in the hospital, so my dad goes all out, letting me invite a shit ton of friends over for a sleepover, making us dinner and breakfast, and just letting me have an amazing time. There's a park across from my suburb that I walk over to sometimes. I decided that I wanted to take my friends there to chill before their parents picked them up. The night before, we were looking out the window and giggling about the man. I know it's shitty, but he was creepy and we were 13, so they knew he was weird. I told them to ignore him if he talked to them, but I didn't even take my own advice. "Hey, Rosie." He said it so quietly, I barely heard him. "My name is Rose, and Rosie is a nickname my grandfather often used. I never told this guy my name. Neither did any of my family members." Hi," I replied, and my friends all scowled at me, knowing I fucked up. "How's your mom?" "She's fine." I go to leave before I pause. "How do you know my name?" "You told me, remember?" "No, I don't, because it didn't happen, but I wanted to get away, so I agreed." "Oh, right," I chuckle. Me and my friends scurry off to the park. The next day, there's a box of chocolate sitting on the porch, a note with "Rosie" and "Chicken Scratch" writing on top of it. I pick it up and look over at the guy. He waves, and I can see that his left hand had disappeared into his pants. Gross. I leave the box out there and tell my dad. The next morning, me and my dad take our dogs out. No sign of the old man. I figured he gave up after he saw me reject his chocolates. A few weeks later, a large family moves into the house, and I hadn't seen a trace of the man until yesterday. I'm 15 now, and the woman who lives in the guy's house comes over yesterday. "Does a Rosie live here?" she asks. I had answered the door, and my heart drops at the nickname from this stranger. "Yeah, why?" She hands me an envelope with my full name written on it. The guy who lived in the house before us said to give Rosie this on her birthday. It's not Rosie's birthday. I was trying to pretend I'm not Rosie. "Oh, well, I just took a guess. He didn't give us a date. Have a good day." My dad opened the envelope, wearing a mask, because, and I quote, "What if he filled it with cocaine?" The note inside just said "love you" in his writing, red ink, my favorite color. So the old guy that lived on the corner, "I don't love you, I never have and never will."